Welcome boys and girls, Questini here with my review of the KIslev rework in Total War Warhammer 3, patch 6.1. It is a great rework. Creative Assembly has certainly implemented some really great things in this one, and it has made KIslev from one of the worst races to play in Warhammer 3 to generally being much better. I'm not sure yet whether or not I'd consider them one of the best races to play, but I do absolutely think that the experience with KIslev is going to be substantially better. That said, it seems clear to me, having played this campaign, the Mitos and Katrin, Ostankya, and Kastalten, it does seem clear to me that this rework was probably handled by a small team of people. And it kind of shows, in particular in some of the balancing regarding supporters, the new supporter system. I'll get into that later on in this video, but suffice to say, there's a huge level of power over here with KIslev. So this is turn 68. I've taken Tsar Nagrun and kind of without really a fight, because like other people fought the armies or weakened them, and then I just swooped in. Malachi fought Grimgor and I just swooped in. It's like, well, I've been going on an adventure. Actually, this might be the first real threat I really face in like 24 turns in this campaign. Obviously, you had Arbol and Archeon early on, but once I dealt with those, it's like it was pretty smooth sailing. Norska is still alive, but that's because I deliberately let them alive. I just had other things to worry about. Why conquer Norska when you can conquer the Empire? Logic, right? Regardless, let's consider the various aspects of KIslev, and I'm going to start with the economy, because it is one of the principal issues that KIslev had before this rework. One of the problems for KIslev's economy came down to the fact that constructing things, building up things for economic benefits was just too expensive for the kind of benefit you would get. Now, they haven't reduced the tiers for, say, the caravan chain, but they have made it cheaper by about half. And that's just by default, and you can make them even cheaper than that. So while the income isn't necessarily buffed, the fact that you now have structures, economic structures that are substantially cheaper does help you out quite a lot when you're playing this campaign. In fact, it goes even further because all the resource buildings can be acquired for free with a particular upgrade. So some rebalancing with respect to resources, and KIslev has a lot of modifiers like 3% from markets, faction-wide farm income, and all that, and you still keep farms. And farms themselves are also even more powerful than before, because beyond the lower cost of farms and markets, the Hallowed Forest now buffs income from farms by 30% in a province. Though, believe it or not, it actually may not necessarily be worth investing in that compared to some other things. You do get a new building. So you still have your churches, and they still give you supporters and patriarchs, okay? And you can also get the kind of benefit that increases growth further. But you also have the courthouse chain. Now, the courthouse chain can give you income from all buildings in the province by 5%, so you're buffing income by 20% if you get one in each settlement. You may not want to do so because of the supporter system. More importantly, however, you can instead go for the ministerial housing, which gives you Frostmaiden capacity +1 at tier 3. So all of KIslev's heroes can increase their capacity at tier 3. Obviously, patriarchs still increase their capacity at tier 2. That was one of the problems with KIslev, that in order to increase Frostmaiden capacity outside of the ones you would get from like some landmarks or research, you would have to get like a Covenant of Ice. So it meant that the number of ice witches would be limited, which nullified the benefit Katrin would have with her Ice Core training system and made that entire thing redundant. Ice Core training system, by the way, is better in virtually every single way. It's faster, it does get results done, but I'll get into that in just a bit. So the economy of KIslev is far better. Things are cheaper, you get more money, it feels very worthwhile to build up your provinces. That's just one aspect. There's also more to go with that. Another thing to talk about with respect to kind of the economy, but also other aspects, military aspects, is how invocations work. So now you have provincial invocations, and then you have army invocations as well. So you get army invocations, give you some kind of combat effect. So character experience, flammable, replenishment in foreign territory, battle healing cap, casualty replenishment, magical attacks, Wrath of Bear, melee attack with Tor, Urson, campaign movement range, bitterness of winter. I do wonder if we can still get... No, I don't know if we can get that elemental bear summon. Doesn't seem like it, but maybe I just haven't really dipped my toes in the research, because it used to be a research benefit. I don't think so, but it doesn't necessarily matter. Still, summoning an elemental bear was pretty cool, even if it wasn't as effective in combat. So you get these invocations, and then you get provincial invocations. They both use devotion on a local level. So devotion has replaced your control, and you need to have over 50. You need to have over 50 in order to invoke either on a settlement or an army. For a settlement, it can instantly complete one turn of construction, or give you a thunderstorm ability for armies and region, barrier for defenses. You can get a growth benefit, local recruitment benefit, or you can put a winter storm in a province. So there's benefits with respect to that. The one issue I do have with invocations is that these effects only come into play when you get over 50. And given the incentives you have in any campaign to go out, do stuff in hostile territory, it kind of feels a bit redundant in some ways. Like, it is a benefit for a more defensive playstyle, but even now, pre-patch and post-patch, KIslev was encouraged and still is encouraged to be very aggressive as a faction. So there's no real tangible benefit, like, except the construction one. I mean, you could also argue the growth one, but KIslev has a ridiculous level of growth anyway. So a lot of this thing, like, I really didn't care that much, like, except like just speeding up construction of various things. So this whole system. And the reason you wouldn't want to engage in this system, by the way, with invocations, is what you get at devoted. So you get all climate penalties are nullified in a province if you get to a very high level, to the highest level, so over 75. So it doesn't matter where you have it. As long as you get to over 75, you can remove climate penalties. There might be a way to permanently remove climate downsides with Atamans, but I'm not 100% certain if I do need to keep an Ataman in a province, or if just they can just remove it completely. Because, like, for instance, I do have provinces over here where I obviously have removed the climate situation. Do I have Atamans? I do have Atamans. I don't know, but, like, I've been moving around Atamans. Atamans don't have that inherently. It should be pointed out about it. Like, you need to actually get it for them. But essentially, you have the system where you can use your control for various effects, but you have a strong incentive to just let it get to 100 as it does for high elves. So why would you bother, right? I think that is where some of the balancing could have been better, because, like, if you're only going to give me climate immunity at over 75, but you require me to have 50 to use any of these effects, and it costs me 50, it's not exactly an incentive for me to deal with the system. Okay, that's one aspect. Let's talk about Atamans. They get Axe and Shield. They're no longer capable of leading armies. They can still get traits, so you don't have the kind of choices you did before. Instead, you have a skill line for them where you can choose how to get them. There's also a building in the special KIslev city, so in Erengrad, Prague, KIslev, which you can get Ataman's estate. This removes all the income from the settlement, but it also gives your Ataman 800 experience per turn. So this is the principal way of really leveling your Atamans. You sacrifice the income of one or two cities, or all of them even, because you can have a lot of money as KIslev in order to get that experience. It also reduces construction costs for building, so it actually might be worth building the stuff as quickly as possible when you're trying to develop those cities, because it will actually end up saving you on money, potentially, right? Especially when you combine it with the goldsmith hall. So combine these two effects, you get a significant construction cost benefit, and these cities do have structures that do cost a lot of money. And Atamans can save you up even further. And those buildings also can give them a unique trait. So devotion, corruption, income from buildings, construction costs, right? For instance, just an example. Now, you do have, Atamans still have general skill, so they have the red line skill, the yellow line skill for melee, and then they have a special skill line, some special skill line choices, and a special blue line. So they can, at the bottom here, they can get more devotion, recruitment benefits. Very importantly, they can get foreman. So this reduces the construction time of all buildings and reduces construction costs by minus 20%. When you start considering other construction cost benefits, especially in the special KIslev cities and other things you can do as KIslev, yeah, you can pretty much get construction done for free. You could before, I might add. I do think this is better. You can also you can also give a garrison and a settlement an experience benefit as well. Though the stuff that's over here at the very end, I mean, it is nice to get extra global recruitment capacity, and it's kind of ridiculous when you think about how much global recruitment you can do as KIslev. I'll just give you an idea. This is a ridiculous number of slots. I've played with mods that gave me more recruitment slots, global recruitment slots that didn't have as much ridiculousness. So you can get a lot of things done. I feel like whoever designed KIslev had this idea in their mind that, oh, KIslev is going to only hold a certain section of territory, but without considering the fact that, yeah, we do go out there, we do things. Because you got to deal with Archaon at the very least, right? You got to deal with Festus, you got to deal with Northcott. They'll just keep attacking you. It's not like you can just sit on your ass and ignore what they're going to do. But then, you know, the cascading effect, it means you have more Atamans, you have more income, you end up with ridiculous levels of money. So it is a balance issue with regards to that. Atamans also provide a Sally attack benefit. So this pink area, why did it have to pay pink? I'm not sure what, are we Slaanesh? But regardless, or this purple area, is if an army is moving through this, even if they're not attacking the settlement, you can then select the settlement and attack an army over here. The settlement garrison will sally out, and with the special KIslev cities, you can get some really powerful garrisons, even without the garrison building available over there. Some other benefits, you know, growth in the local province, all that. You can increase the range, right, of that attack, movement range. But then you have a choice over here between supporting the Orthodoxy or supporting the Ice Court. I'd probably say supporting the Ice Court is generally the best choice for one reason. For two reasons. One, getting churches is generally the better choice because, yes, you can increase your Frost Maiden capacity, but churches will give you Patriarch capacity and also give you Patriarch recruitment as well in themselves, right? And they also give you that growth benefit. It can be worth getting the Provincial Courthouse. Basically, that's the thing. If you want Frost Maidens, it's not necessarily worth going for the Ministerial Housing. It gives you more Ice Court supporters, but you can increase your income from all buildings by 5%. So that's 20% income benefit in a province like the Eastern Oblast. Like, yeah, I'm generating almost 5K. That's pretty ridiculous. Because whichever side you support over here for the special skill line, like you'll get Biting Wind, you'll get 5 Ice Court supporters, or if you're supporting if you're supporting the Orthodox, you get 1 Patriarch capacity. 1 Patriarch capacity does not compare to 1 Frost Maiden capacity. It's actually completely redundant as far as I see it. I wouldn't necessarily remove it, but all the same. You can also summon a unit of Horse Archers over here for a skill. Then the second skill line choice over here has to do with 3 different skills that each of them is pretty damn ridiculous. But let's consider this. Groundbreaker nullifies all climate penalties in a province. I'm not sure if this effect sticks even when you move an Ataman from a province. But effectively, you can remove the penalty and get the construction benefit. That is pretty damn ridiculous. Or you can go with Ambassador, which gives you 10 diplomatic relations with all factions. All factions. This makes KIslev insanely good at diplomacy, by the way. Get 10 Atamans, you nullify any aversion any faction might feel to you. Like, you could ally Archaon if you wanted to, if you got to 10 Atamans. But it also crucially increases tradable resource production by 100% in the local province when Ataman. So, dependent on what you're picking, it's gonna be a pretty damn ridiculous situation. Like, consider some provinces which have multiple resources that can, or have one resource available to you. You can end up with just a ridiculous amount of resources being produced, because you're looking at doubling the wine production over here. And if I look at the trade situation, right, you look at wine, you look at these kind of things, like, it would obviously be worth using with certain resources more than others. But yeah, it's pretty damn crazy. Incidentally, I'm generating like 30,000, almost 30,000 income from trade. That means KIslev can actually match the high elves in terms of their trade. Makes sense. Like, KIslev is not, like, KIslev has some very poor regions, but they also have some very rich regions. Like, the cities of KIslev should be incredibly rich. I think that's still a bit of a disappointment. Like, you look at the income buildings from the cities of KIslev, they're still not worth fucking producing whatsoever. Just because trade tariffs don't really do much. Yeah, you get some income from markets, but I'd rather have other buildings over there. Potentially, like, yeah, I could get rid of this one, for instance, right? Get rid of this building, get that income building. But, I mean, if you're using these cities to train Atamans, which you should, because it's going to generate more income for you in the long term if you do so, then, yeah, it's pointless to even consider that building. So I think that may not have been the best balancing idea, but you do have the ability of nullifying climate penalties. And I think it actually works much better with Atamans. It does take a certain level. You do need to get to a certain level to get this skill, right? So you do need level 12 in order to get this skill. So it's annoying to have to wait those turns. But once you get the cascading effect in a long campaign is absolutely freaking ridiculous. And yeah, I think like CA needs to handle the balancing a bit more better over here, because it's a bit... I think like the problem is, like, it's designed clearly on idea, like, oh, people are going to be more passive, but then, as I stated, you do have every incentive to go far beyond KIslev's boundaries. Again, you can, even if you're just going to conquer Norska, deal with Festus, deal with Archeon, that's still a good chunk of fucking territory, and then you run into other factions that are going to be hostile, right? Though you may not do it as fast. I think Boris Ursus has the ability of being really, really fast in this respect, and yes, he's still the best legendary lord of KIslev. Why is he still the best? Well, there's a certain benefit he has that makes him ridiculously good. So beyond the fact that Boris Ursus has a better climate dynamic than freaking Castalton and Katrin, because he has Wasteland, which, yes, you can nullify climate. Having climate from the beginning of campaign still makes him better. But then he actually has a unique commandment only available to him. Guess what that does? It gives you 10 devotion. So if your consideration is like, oh, I want to get high devotion because I want to nullify climate penalties and maybe even actually take advantage of some of these, then Boris Ursus ends up reigning supreme just because of this commandment. Yes, it does affect your income by quite a bit, but kind of doesn't matter in certain situations. Like, why would I not use this in, the special KIslev cities? Like, I can generate a lot of money otherwise, right? So those are some aspects to consider on that. It also kind of feels a bit bloated. Like, there's mechanic on top of mechanic, modifier on top of modifier. It works, but I admit I kind of would have preferred if Creative Assembly had kind of removed some of those, because you end up with insane results. Like, to understand how fucking ridiculous what I've achieved in this campaign is, I've played Grombrindle campaigns where I would have struggled to achieve this. You can do this as Grombrindle, post from the decay, though it's also kind of worth pointing out that Grombrindle only can manage that with guaranteed confederation with the other legendary lords of the dwarves through the Age of Reckoning system. The fact that I've conquered this vast of an empire while dealing with people like, Archeon. If you're wondering why Tamarkhan hasn't been a friend so far, I sold them some of Archeon's shit, pacified them for a long while. Anyway, so it ends up being a bit freaking ridiculous, because then you gotta remember the special cities of KIslev. So, global recruitment capacity for Citadel of Prague, recruitment duration. You also gain from resource building Ataman experience, but yeah, you end up with, like, this is one of the reasons you want to go far and wide as KIslev, because like resource buildings generally have like a faction-wide effect, and once they start stacking, it ends up being a bit ridiculous. Like if Creative Assembly's intent with the rework was to make a more defensive playstyle for KIslev work, mission failed very hard, right? It's just a lot of stacking modifiers on top of another. The more territory you hold, the more Atamans you get the idea. But that's actually not the biggest reason why you want to go so crazy on expanding across the world. If you're playing with KIslev, that would actually have to do with supporters. But before we get into that, let's talk a bit about the research tree. So it's been changed. If you look at the land, Ostankya has an entire tab over here for her special stuff, the stuff we already have. So you still kind of want to get Troll Country Pathfinder, but there are a lot of the things here are not necessarily worth it, especially like, you know, losing 15 growth at 30% physical resistance. KIslev has a really good army, so I don't think that's necessarily worth it, but it's a trade-off if you want to go for it. A couple of things have been changed, a couple of things have been modified, but a lot of like things that you knew have stayed the same. But yeah, the land focuses on kind of like Ostankya, basically. It's just there for Ostankya primarily, right? Then you have technology, so various military technology, including the ability of getting immunity to mountain and cast waste attrition. This takes a while, but it's actually a really nice thing because it means that conquering the entire cast waste is actually far more viable for KIslev than it is for other factions. I do think it's a bit too long over there. I think, like, you do have ways of reducing cast waste attrition, but yeah, I think like just it takes a bit too long. A lot of other things like, yeah, military benefits. And then you have the state. So you have the Ice Court, the Orthodoxy, and the governance, right? So Ice Court, you gain one slot for Frost Maidens and one for Ice Witch Lords. Through research, you also get some Ice Court support over here and character experience, then various other benefits. This is a bit bugged, by the way. Like, it's supposed to require me to unlock these, and it's like, I just got this. But yeah, global recruitment duration -1, various orthodoxy benefits, supporters. You do get the ability of, like, reducing construction costs for resource-producing buildings, but, and here's the problem, you can also get free resource construction because of supporters. So, bit redundant. This is what I mean, like, there are some things, like, you know, just so much shit thrown in together that ends up not making that much sense. So that's how they've changed the research tree. Overall, pretty solid, not horrible. Like, at least we no longer have to pay devotion for various research. You do have to pay spirit essences if you're playing Ostankya. But let's talk about the new supporter system. I'll probably do a whole video on every single effect because I could spend quite a bit of time over here. But you do have War, Hierarchy, Dominion, Legacy, and Tenets. So all kinds of different benefits. Like, obviously, War is military benefits for the most part. Though you can also get some, like, upkeep for Tsar Guard and Ice Guard units. Like, this is the thing. KIslev's economy has been significantly buffed, but also they get, like, these, they had before and still have these kind of modifiers available to them. So you get a bunch of military benefits, like replenishment, where HP is low for anyone riding a bear, any lord that's riding a bear, or replacing by our blood to an insanely powerful ability that makes units, like, far more deadly in combat. Like, KIslev was already broken before in multiplayer. Like, obviously this doesn't affect multiplayer, but KIslev is, like, banned from a lot of multiplayer tournaments because of By Our Blood, and now it's like you get an ability for the supporter system to buff this up. With things like Hierarchy, like, Ice Court is focused on diplomacy and, like, characters, so, like, character experience gain, all that, but then you get to, like, upkeep, diplomacy, some devotion, but then you get things like construction cost -25% for infrastructure buildings. Yeah, pretty damn crazy when you think about it, like movement range or being able to get some really crazy things. Like, resource buildings have no construction costs, for instance. That's probably the first you want to go. Population surplus. Devotion 100 plus 100 for newly captured settlements in chaotic waste climate. The supporter system does heavily incentivize you to actually fight chaos. So if Creative Assembly wanted to rework KIslev to push a more defensive playstyle, that didn't quite work out. If there was a desire to push us to fight Chaos more, it did work out in that respect, quite significantly so. Like, you have the ability of removing fighting penalties, you have the ability of gaining control benefits, you have the ability of removing cast waste attrition. So there's a large number of tools that are added to toolbox over there. There is a but. The way you actually gain supporters. So you have tiers. Catra and Castalton, for their short campaign victory conditions, need to get to tier 10 for Ice Court or Orthodoxy, dependent on what we're talking about, whoever you're playing. You get 1 tier for each 100 supporters. So you basically need 1,000 if you're playing Catra and Castalton. The way you gain supporters, well, you gain various supporters through trade. So you get, 3, 4, 5, 7 from buildings. Like over here, I'm gaining from buildings 103. This is one of the reasons why the defensive playstyle of KIslev, or the primary reason why the defensive playstyle of KIslev doesn't work. Because the more settlements you have, the more buildings you can construct, the more supporters you can gain. Outside of that, you don't really have a lot of good ways of gaining supporters. You can get 10 supporters from Baal and Chaos, but there's a bit of an issue with that. So you see, Katrin and Castalton, the way they gain supporters is different than how Ostankya and Borsursus gain supporters. Basically, Ostankya and Borsursus are far ahead. So you can gain 10 supporters for battles fought against Chaos, or battles against either Ice Court enemies or Orthodoxy enemies, until you confederate Ice Court. Like, there's no more restriction on confederation if you're playing Castalton or Katrin. So if you're playing a Katrin campaign, you want to confederate Castalton, you can do so easily. But here's the problem. That battle fought against Chaos does not apply if you're playing Katrin and you want to get Orthodoxy support. You won't have that. Instead, you will have supporters gained from battles against Orthodoxy enemies. You don't have both. Borsursus and Ostankya have both. So obviously, you don't get supporters from fighting your own enemies, right? If you're playing Katrin, you don't gain supporters from battling Ice Court enemies because you are the Ice Court. And you don't really have a significant benefit in it. Like, you have like 50 supporters with your own side, but it's irrelevant. There's also a bit of a bug. So if I were to end this turn over here, then it would go to 100. It would grant me an extra tier, but it would not grant me any more. So the bar fills up just fine. Like, from turn to turn, the progress you have on the bar, it will stick. But if the bar reaches over 100 on the end turn, it will basically be at 0, regardless of how many more other supporters you should have. So yeah, some testing should have been done, some balance changes with regards to that. But essentially, this incentivizes you at KIslev to go crazy in terms of conquering vast swaths of territory, because the principal way of gaining supporters is not even for battles with Chaos, though there are plenty of those to be had. But the principal way of gaining supporters, especially if you're trying to get Orthodoxy supporters as, say, Katrin, or Ice Court supporters as Castalton, is to get buildings. Get a lot of settlements, get buildings. You are incentivized, I guess, to not just confederate the KIslev factions, but the problem is, confederating Castalton and Katrin, like, when you're telling a player you should not confederate the faction because you can gain a benefit, I was like, so you're screwing me over. Basically, like, consider this. If you have a tier difference, like, this is a harmony meter. If you go too far on one side or another, you start getting penalties. The first, actually, is a diplomatic penalty, which is irrelevant if you've confederated them, right? I haven't gone past, like, the first stage of that, but I think there's some devotion downsides if you have too much of a difference. So you are heavily incentivized to keep it balanced. If the harmony system for Cafe had been like that at the beginning, that would have been great. But here's the problem. You don't want to not confederate Catra and Castalton. The benefits that both of these provide, especially Castalton, and if you confederate one, you want to get the other as well. So Castalton gives you Patriarch recruitment in every fucking province. Why the hell would I not want to confederate them? Whatever kind of benefit I get potentially from getting more supporters and herding the cat that is the AI in the game is nullified by the skill line that he has. So there's no reason not to do that. Katrin, there's less reason to confederate her, she was pretty crap before, she's still pretty crap right now. Unfortunately, the KIslev rework didn't really include a skill line change for Katrin. Actually, I think they made her worse. So they gave her permafrost ward, so she's personally better in combat, but she got missile block chance and lost the ward save she had. I'm like, in what world is losing a ward save worth getting 15% missile block chance as KIslev, considering the shit that KIslev is dealing with? So yeah, Katrin is worse off from that perspective. I think there's a couple of other skill line choices. Speaking of actually about skill line choices, like there's a handful of various things over here. But speaking about skill line choices, eye switches have stayed the same, but boyars have gotten some special skill line changes. So you get a cav benefit, directional armor for KIslev units, character experience for characters in force, or so you get one of six choices over here, or you can get, or a couple of choices over here that you can basically pick, right? But you can get splash attack power, bonus to the infantry, glorious charge for the character, or rally. But they do exclude certain other things. So you can't get everything. Like basically you can get 2 skills. So yeah, you can get a couple of things over here. Like you can get glorious charge for a boyar on a bear. Glorious charge is pretty crazy, actually. So boyars are far more viable than they were before. That leaves us with just the Ice Core training system. It has been massively buffed. Like, eye switches don't get any kind of skill line changes. They never needed that. Though I think it would be a bit nice, but yeah, it's obviously through the special effects that they have that they were always worth it. So you do have a number of choices to make through the Ice Court training system. The training itself is faster done in that respect. And you still have things like growth in a province, construction costs for old buildings in a province, which pretty sure that stacks. Campaign movement, or, get campaign move range, upkeep, Vanguard, for instance. Essentially, when you're playing, the way the Ice Court training system worked was pretty crap, because you would want to get some really good traits that they had, but it was always randomized. So during the course of a campaign, you almost had no reason to actually engage in it. When instead you do is you would just play a campaign, probably around the cast, train a bunch of these level 1, save them up, load them up. You still want to do that at the very least at the beginning of the campaign, for the first 1 or 2. But once that's done, there's no reason not to just engage in the Ice Core training system. You could still just, abuse the load save character system. But outside of the very early situation, I didn't feel a need to. And that is a much better situation. Like, cheesing will always happen, and taking advantage of game systems will always happen, but there's a difference between being able to do it and having a significant incentive to do it. You no longer have that incentive except the first couple of turns. Maybe it would just be great if we could get one Frost Maiden and Ice Witch that we could choose at the beginning of a campaign, the traits, but yeah, we have a low save character system for a reason. Let me go into a bit more details on that subject, though. So the way it functions is that as you're training your eye switches, the system works as it used to in some ways. Like, you still have to click the button and you go for a series of choices, but the way those choices are handled is different. So you do get these kind of choices. Like, you get some kind of province-wide benefit, some kind of combat benefits, or like Winds of Magic, or armor, or stock. There is some difference between Ice Switch Lords and Frost Maiden heroes, in particular with the economic benefits. But this is how the system works. So, like, Protector and Court Agent works the same for both of them. And yeah, that's a ridiculous amount of patriarch capacity. But Architect and Economist works a bit different. So a lot of Frost Maidens can reduce your recruitment cost to basically 0. I'm pretty sure that stacks. Or you can reduce construction costs by minus 5% for Frost Maidens. Whereas for Ice Witch Lords, you reduce recruitment costs by 20% for her army and increase your income by 10%. So the income is the same, but the recruitment cost is different, and so is the construction cost, like just different values. Lower values for Frost Maidens than Ice Witch Lords. All kinds of benefits. More to talk about on that subject. As for Ostankya's campaign, so after turn 1 of your campaign, you get the choice, either staying in Agrand or teleporting over here to Plesk. Your landmarks, quote-unquote, get teleported too, or rather you get them over here. So you get the Widow Tree over here in Plesk, and you get the Ostankya's Hut in Voltgrad. And this entire province starts under the control of the Norskans that Prague starts at war with. So Malachi campaign 2.0, it's kind of funny when you teleport, it says it's a much more difficult campaign. But keep in mind, Ostankya still uses the supporter system. She still benefits immensely from this. While it is a harder start, to be sure, to some extent. You can always use Malachi as a shield, by the way. And this is precisely what I've done. Like, who do you think is being up our bull over here? Like, literally, Archeon is coming for me, but it's like Borisurs is just gonna beat the crap out of him because I'm giving him that time. But here's a little interesting nugget. So, they teleport her army, they abandon, like if you took the forest over here, they give it back to the Dark Elves, the Bleak Hold Fortress, is razed to the ground, but I just recruited another army that only had a lord, so I could recruit the Bleak Hold Fortress and just build another army. That does feel like guilt, doesn't it? To be certain, it only works if you do recruit another lord, and maybe it is because this was a load save character lord, so yeah, creative assembly, well done on that. To be honest, I don't think it's necessarily something they should change, because there's not necessarily that many benefits in holding territory over here, and you can always teleport back here once you get the teleportation to Magical Forest, for the record. So it's like, yeah, there's not as much reason as you might think. This actually was kind of a waste of time. The one benefit, though, is you can get another of Ostankya's huts over here. It's maybe not necessarily that significant, because by the time you can get it, it's like, the only thing that's worth it is that for diplomatic relations with KIslev factions. But really, by the time you get one, it's like you're probably going to be very well on your way towards getting a lot of confederations going. And the question you're going to have to ask yourself is it worth it to confederate it, right? Because right now, I'm fighting the enemies Katra and Kastaltin have, and I'm fighting against Chaos, so I'm gaining supporters for that. But that should give you a clue you went on the supporter system and on the kind of balancing of legendary lords. Effectively, Borisurs and Ostankya are vastly ahead of Katra and Kastaltin. I think like it would make sense if Katra and Kastaltin had a vast benefit for their own faction, like the Ice Court or Orthodoxy, but they don't. They have a bit of a benefit, but it's very minor. And it's not necessarily, it's just a starting benefit, and it's not something that necessarily carries over throughout the course of their campaign. So some balancing could be done on that, because there was no reason to play Katra and Kastaltin before. There's still no reason. Ostankya and Borisurs were much better legendary lords in terms of their power, and who's better between Ostankya and Borisurs? Well, Borisurs has still that devotion benefit. It still had Borisurs had an invocation benefit that Ostankya didn't have. She can now use invocations as well right now, but Borisurs can get more done because he's the only one with that commandment. And understand this, starting close to your foe is not necessarily a downside, especially when you start with a mega powerful army like Borisurs does, because he has one of the strongest starting fucking armies in the game. And that's not an exaggeration. Like, Tsarguard and Warbear Riders are ridiculously good early on. And that allows you to deal with Arbol and Archeon early on, while also getting diplomatic confederation with Prague and all that. I think Ostankya is better from the perspective of a longer campaign, but by the time you're getting into a longer campaign, you're so ridiculously fucking broken that it doesn't matter. Though, don't get me wrong. Using her ultimate ability, summoning armies, spirit essences, it's certainly a lot of power, but it's also kind of fluff, because it doesn't matter most of the time. Like, the only situation in which all the hexes I've built with her in the Witch's Hut matter, and yes, you still have to go over here and press this button again and again, though since you're starting next to KIslev, it's far less fucking relevant than it was before, right? Like, it was relevant because you wanted to get KIslev as quickly as possible. Her new starting position is far more interesting, far better, and heck of a lot more fun than the one. Like, the frustration of having to go over here and construct and just do these hexes every single fucking turn is still there, but it doesn't feel as frustrating as it did before, because you can kind of ignore it right now. you couldn't quite do so before because, again, you couldn't get to KIslev. Also, it's worth pointing out that she can now recruit patriarchs, even though even if she stays in Agron, so she still has that patriarch recruitment capability. Thank you, CA. That was needed for a record. Like, you still don't have the unit roster, but at least you get patriarch, so you can make it work, right? Even if you don't go back to KIslev for a while. Like, there's units you do have to. You do want to get there at one point. I understand why they didn't add the magical forest, but my conclusion is the race rework, bit imbalanced, or more than a bit, but it does work. It makes the race much better. The Legendary Lord situation, a bit disappointing, but, you know, there's limitations on what you can expect on with regards to that. The one major disappointment I have with this is, like, I really feel KIslev could have used a significant or some kind of terrain update. Like, if they had a settlement that was a forest over here, a magical forest, instead of just kind of making Pleska forest, but not really. And I know why they didn't make it a magical forest, because that would have fucked up the campaign for everyone else. Like, it would have, if Pleska had been a magical forest, well, I guess they could just remove it and make a magical forest inherently, right? Just make the External Blast, but then kind of some issues with regards to that too. So I get it. There's no band-aid solution. It would require more work, but it is the one disappointment I have with regards to this. But I think Creative Assembly has done a good job. However, I am not just gonna stand up and say applause, please. Because I'm gonna say this very clearly. This should have happened when Shadows of Change came out. In fact, I would dare say that what we got even now is still less than what we should have gotten in Shadows of Change. Like, you look at the reworks, you look at Front's Decay, you look at Elements of Destruction. Those were really good reworks, and you got campaign changes too. You got a starting position change for Ostankya, but that's it. Boris, Ursus, Katrin, and Kostalton do have better campaigns because of the racial reworks. But when you look at Front's Decay, or you look at Elements of Destruction, it wasn't just the racial reworks that made Gelt or Karl Franz or Skarsnik better. Those helped, absolutely, significantly even. But it was the effort that Creative Assembly. They have not put in that effort for this. Now, I'm not going to say that the people who worked on this didn't do a good job, because they clearly did. But I am going to criticize Creative Assembly for the fact that they clearly didn't want to put the resources in this. They wanted to do it on the cheap. Truth be told, it boils down to the situation of Shadows of Change. If Creative Assembly had been allowed to get away with Shadows of Change, that is how things would have gone going forward. That's why you need to hold people's feet to the fire. When they do good, you applaud them for that. In this case, I'm not going to applaud them for fixing something that they should have fixed a while ago, right? I'm not going to do that. And for all the things that they want to get away with SOC. They have made KIslev playable, so good job on whoever worked on this, and hopefully it was not too much of a crunch, but it's not enough from my point of view. Would I recommend purchasing Shadows of Change on the KIslev side of things? Isn't that a good question? I would not recommend it on the Cafean side of things. Certainly not. I don't think Cafe is worth playing right now. On the Siege side, no. Flat no. I could recommend it for some of the units and all that, but I would say if you're looking to play fucking Siege, just buy Champions of Chaos and play Kairos. It's probably better. But for KIslev, I mean, the one benefit of playing Ostankya is you can actually get to Ostankya, because if you're playing other KIslev campaigns, good luck confederating her unless you're using a mod. And I'm not gonna lie, Ashinas and Hags and all that, they're fun, right? Do I think Ostankya's campaign is really that worth buying for? Kind of. So, maybe. I do certainly think it's far worth purchasing far more than it was before, so, just a maybe. But out of the three races affected by Shadows of Change, I would say the KIslev content pack is probably the one that's most worth it at the moment. Don't bother with Cafe, don't bother with Siege until they actually properly reworked that. And no, they did not rework Siege. They reworked they added some stuff for Kairos, but they didn't really rework Siege. Very minor stuff. I'll get into that in a separate video. But that's all I had to say. Christine, signing out.